Assalamu alaikum, fam. Hope you're doing well. Let's continue reading. Thus spoke Zarathustra. It's quite nerdy. It's very beneficial. Expands your creative thinking. You never know if you're in a class and you want to write a story. Might be inspiring. Who knows? Let's dig in, okay? Alright. Where is the lightning to lick you with its tongue? Jeez, what a way to open the video, right? So, if you're not familiar, when there's a bonfire, the flames, when they flicker, they call it the lick of the flame. Because when, like, you know how a snake licks the air? There's like a flickering. So when he says, can the lightning lick you with its tongue, it's kind of like zap you. We get it, right? But it's also like to zip you, you know? It's pretty funny. Where is the frenzy with which you should be inoculated? Jeez. You know, I love this guy. He's so funny. Behold, I teach you the overman. He is this lightning. He is this frenzy. When Zarathustra had spoken thus, one of the people cried, Now we have heard enough about the tightrope walker. Now let us see him too. And all the people laughed at Zarathustra, but the tightrope walker, believing that the word concerned him, began his performance. 4. Zarathustra, however, beheld the people and was amazed when he spoke thus. Man is a rope, tied between beast and overman, a rope over an abyss. Now let's look at that as a rope. One end is the beast and the other is the overman. You ever seen that game Tug of War? It's like who's gonna win, which side will make it snap, and then which will have the bigger chunk of the rope, right? And over an abyss. Wow. A dangerous across, a dangerous on the way, a dangerous looking back, a dangerous shuddering and stopping. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end. This is interesting. We are not ends, but a bridge. We're all kind of bridges to each other's consciousness, right? That's an interesting way to look at it. Something that's crossed, right? Very interesting. What can be loved in man is that he is an overture and a going under. An overture and a going under. I love those who do not know how to live except by going under, for they are those who cross over. I love those who do not know how to live except by going under, for they are those who cross over. Because when you go under to examine, you then can cross over to the other side of understanding, the bridge of understanding. I love the great despisers, because they are the great revelers and arrows of longing for the other shore. I love those who do not first seek behind the stars for reason to go under and be a sacrifice, but who sacrifice themselves for the earth, that the earth may some day become the overman's. Now this is interesting. Okay, so not seeking to go behind the stars, but instead overcoming the earth. Now this is interesting because instead of being overly outward, it appears, and focusing on ideals and utopias, rather you focus on what is in this carnal flesh and the abode in which you reside, and overcoming all those elements instead of sitting and only abstracting. Maybe. This is interesting. I love him who lives to know, and who wants to know so that the overman may live some day. I agree with that. Living to know, to be seeking, to be learning, not to be stagnant and coddled and a jello brain that doesn't really survive well under pressure, right? Because to overcome, you must know, and to know is to fail and to try again, to get back up and try again, ceaselessly. And thus he wants to go under, so under, not just surface level, to really go into the depths. I love him who works and invents to build a house for the overman, and to prepare the earth and animal, and plant for him, for thus he wants to go under. Now look at this. I love him who works and invents to build a house for the overman. So to build a house, a place where the overman can go, a place of comfort, a place of nutrition, a place of solitude, a place to expand. All the essence that comes with the term house, both symbolic and literal, right? A shelter from the earth, from the outside elements, but still there, and to prepare earth, right? To really make it to where you can press forward, to always go under or over and become the overman, right? I love him who loves his virtue, for virtue is the will to go under and an arrow of longing. So here, to love the virtue will go under. And so, again, he keeps emphasizing not being on the surface level, right? To really look at the nitty-gritty. An arrow of longing. When you shoot that arrow, it has a bullseye. The target may be far, but the aim and the purpose of why you shot the arrow, right? The arrow longing to get to its mark, to get to its end. You see? Very, very interesting. Yes. I love him who does not hold back one drop of spirit for himself, but wants to be entirely the spirit, his virtue. Thus, he strides over the bridge as spirit. Now, this is interesting because to your soul, to really let it manifest, because that will help you become the overman, because then you will live. This is very interesting. The overture, the bridge, going across. Be entirely the spirit of his virtue, just wholly manifest. Not bulked up into a puddle that, is putrid, but to really be forward. I love him who makes his virtue his addiction and his catastrophe. For his virtue's sake, he wants to live on and to live no longer. Yeah, this is very, very powerful statement right here. Because virtue is your addiction, right? This is interesting because it can be both mental, like always striving to learn, always striving to participate in the arena of this world, to always extract every part of your energy ceaselessly and tirelessly, leaving no part of your soul unsqueezed and unperfected, because only then will you be able to become the overman. Very potent example. Now, the catastrophe is maybe you become overhermit. Maybe you become so Heraclean that you lead to your own demise. But still, you're ever onward, to the point where you will want to expire and exit, right? Very, very interesting. I love him who does not want to have too many virtues. One virtue is more than two. It's interesting. Too many virtues. Very interesting, right? That one you wondered, like, what do you mean by that one, right? Because there's a general category. But which one in particular? One virtue is more than two. So kind of saying there are more virtues that are more noble than others. Because it is more of a noose on which his catastrophe may hang. Oh, a noose. A virtue that can hang. Wow. I love him whose soul squanders itself, who wants no thanks in return for none. For he always gives away and does not want to preserve himself. The soul that squanders itself. Now, this has to do, obviously, too, with making virtue his addiction, that it's the noose on which the catastrophe may hang, the soul squandering itself. There's a play on words going on here. Wants no thanks, so doing it for virtue's sake, right? Doing it for him becoming the sort of overman, the overture going under, becoming the overman on this earth. Not doing it for the mob. He does not want to preserve himself. So remember, not wanting to preserve himself reigns back to making it your own destruction. It almost leads to your own demise. And who wants to know that the overman may live someday and thus wants to go under? So now you also think about death. Because here he's saying going under. Now you're thinking about going under the earth, into the soil, into the grave. Now we're getting into deeper topics here. I love him who is abashed when the dice fall, make his fortune, and asks, am I then a crooked gambler? For he wants to perish. I love him who casts golden words before his deeds. Golden words before your deeds. And always does even more than he promises. For he wants to go under, doing more than what you promised. So now we're having at this point, go under, being repeated and also have various meanings. I love him who justifies future and redeems past generations, for he wants to perish of the present. That's powerful, right? So, justifies the future, sounds very hopeful, redeems the past, having forgiveness, right? Perish of the present, having disdain for what is occurring now. It's something very common now. There's nostalgia for the past and hope for the future, and despising the present. I love him who chastens his God because he loves his God, for he must perish of the wrath of his God. Now this is powerful too, because chastens, having a sort of command over you that makes you love God, but also God punishing you for your deeds, and that'll lead to your perishment on this earth, returning to your God, right? I love him whose soul is deep, even in being wounded, and who can perish of small experience. Thus, he gladly goes over to the bridge. So here we go. Now we're getting into the bridge of life, right? From beginning to end, your high peak and your low. You're a baby here, because a bridge has a curve and also straight across as well, right? But also you're starting from a baby to an old man, dead, right? Gladly goes over the bridge, whose soul is deep. So remember how he says go under. So now his soul is such of a refined character that it is deep with virtue, chastened to God, an overman who's fortified, and justifies the future, redeems the past. So he has a very high character refinement, most definitely. I love him whose soul is overfull, so that he forgets himself, and all things are in him, thus all things spell his go under. Okay, so full of himself, that he forgets himself. So he's so filled with knowledge, so alive, so present, that the sense of the self kind of goes away to you're in this sort of existence. You're this overarching energy force. And eventually, everything under your command, as a sort of overman, will be under because you're going over it, because you're overcoming it, and it is going over and under. It's very interesting the way he's playing around with these words in different contexts. I love him who has a free spirit and a free heart. Thus his head is only the entrails of his heart. Your head is the entrails of your heart. It's interesting because the intestines are kind of squiggly, and those grooves in your brain are kind of squiggly, but that's a very unique way to put it. But his heart drives him to go under. Well, his heart driving him to go under, right? To the dirt, and also to God, and also to death, and also to not just be on the surface level, right? I love all those who are heavy drops falling one by one out of the dark cloud that hangs over men. So, refreshment. So, the heavy drops. Wetness, water, life, vitality coming down out of a dark cloud of nihilism, pessimism, refreshing and reviving the earth over the darkened clouds and depression of men who have nothing growing inside of them. The water penetrates under the surface into the soil, allowing what was under it to come up, right? They herald the advent of lightning, and as heralds they perish. Behold, I am a herald of the lightning, and a heavy drop from the cloud. This lightning is called overman. So remember, the lightning had made it be the licks, right? It's, like wake you up, right? Kind of zaps you, goes under your skin into your nervous system, coming into the entrails of your heart and making your spirit free. This sort of very alive, present, yet wanting to perish from the present as well, right? It's really quite fantastic the way he worded that. I love, it's like, to say love is very endearing, very embracing, right? Not running away, but to hold on, to adorn, to value, to withstand, to grasp, to covet. All those things are embedded within that word. Very interesting. What do you think? German philosophers, they are quite interesting.